It was meant to be a light promotional interview for Meghan Markle's new podcast launch, but what unfolded live on Good Morning America left the audience stunned and media scrambling. Meghan had agreed to appear in studio for a rare morning television interview with George Stephanopoulos, a longtime ABC anchor known for his directness and political poise. The GMA studio had been buzzing for days in advance. Producers were thrilled to have the Duchess of Sussex booked, hoping for high ratings and soft public image repair after months of critical press. Meghan entered the studio wearing a crisp white blouse and tailored navy pants, exuding poise and charm. The crowd clapped politely. Stephanopoulos welcomed her warmly, but there was an unmistakable tension in his smile, polite but rigid. Meghan thanked him graciously, referencing the importance of open dialogue, especially when the world feels so divided. George nodded. But his first question set the tone. Do you think your podcast is more about healing or about rewriting the narrative that's already been written? Meghan blinked slowly, clearly thrown. Oh, it's about authenticity, she answered carefully. It's about reclaiming voice, not rewriting anything. George followed up with an almost imperceptible smirk. But whose voice yours? Or the one the press has built around you? The mood changed instantly. Meghan attempted to steer the conversation back to empowerment and storytelling, noting how women's voices are often diminished or twisted. But George, not missing a beat, countered, and do you feel you've been silenced? Or simply criticized? The tone was sharp but measured, dressed in journalistic neutrality. Meghan stiffened slightly. There's a difference between criticism and character assassination, she said, her voice remaining steady, but eyes narrowing. George leaned forward. But surely you understand that when you enter public life, especially royalty, you inherit scrutiny. Isn't transparency part of the job? Meghan replied, transparency doesn't mean surrendering humanity. A line? George wasn't done. Yet some would argue you've crossed others' boundaries, revealing family disputes, naming names. Is that transparency or retaliation? Meghan's composure cracked for the first time. Oh, that's honesty, she said firmly. Painful honesty. Yes, but necessary. George pressed. Necessary for whom? The public? Your healing? Or your brand? The air was thick now. The studio audience, previously silent out of respect, was shifting nervously. Meghan looked off camera for a moment, visibly swallowing. Her irritation. From that point forward, the conversation turned from tense to borderline combative. Meghan, known for her careful words and pre-savvy presence, began to look visibly cornered. If I were a man telling my story, I doubt we'd be calling it a brand, she snapped. George responded, yet the story comes with curated imagery, monetized content, and contracts with Spotify and Netflix. Is it unfair to call it a brand? Meghan shot back. So a woman in control of her narrative is now accused of exploitation? That's quite a leap, George. His eyebrows raised slightly. I'm simply pointing out how perception collides with intention. The audience decides what's authentic. Meghan shook her head slowly. No, the audience is guided by how media chooses to frame women like me. And this is exactly what I mean. Her voice had risen. The conversation had veered from subtle tension into a clear clash of worldviews. George leaned back, attempting a diplomatic smile. But Meghan was now visibly agitated, eyes flashing, posture rigid. She took a slow breath, but it did nothing to smooth the frustration on her face. The breaking point came when George referenced the infamous Oprah interview. Some critics argue that instead of seeking resolution privately, you made a global spectacle of family grievances. Would you do it differently now? Meghan visibly froze. The question wasn't unexpected, but the way it was worded felt like a trap. That interview was about survival, she said, her tone icy. I was not performing. I was surviving. George replied, but some argue that public healing often deepens private wounds. Do you regret that choice? Meghan glanced again, toward the producer's booth. Her jaw clenched. What I regret, she said sharply, is agreeing to sit here and once again be asked to defend my right to speak truthfully about my experience. The studio was completely silent. George blinked, thrown off by her directness. "So you're saying this interview, this very conversation is part of the problem?" Meghan stood up suddenly. Yes, I am." Gasps echoed from behind the cameras. "I came here to talk about a project that empowers women," she said, standing tall and looking directly at George, "and instead, I've been dissected." Asterisk before anyone could intervene, Meghan removed her mic with a swift, controlled motion and turned toward the producers. "We're done." George sat back, stunned. "Meghan, we'd still like to," but she was already walking off the set. "You wanted a headline?" She tossed over her shoulder. There it is. The live broadcast cut abruptly to commercial. Producers scrambled, unsure whether to continue the segment or issue a statement. George remained seated, lips pressed together tightly. Cameras kept rolling behind the scenes, capturing him muttering, "Well, that went well." Within minutes, social media was ablaze. Clips of Meghan walking out began circulating with captions like, "Duchess defies media again," and "Stephanopoulos pushes too far." Hashtags like #MeghanWalkout and #GMA drama exploded on Twitter. The royal watchers, media critics, and everyday viewers all had opinions, and the polarized responses lit up every feed. Public reactions were deeply divided. Some applauded Meghan's bold stand, praising her for confronting what they saw as thinly veiled hostility masked as journalism. Others criticized her for playing the victim and storming out instead of engaging tough questions. Morning shows and late-night pundits covered the walkout endlessly. Fox News dubbed it another Markle meltdown, while The View praised her courage in walking out when condescension crossed the line. Piers Morgan predictably called it another stunt from a serial complainer, while supporters tweeted defenses by the second. Meanwhile, ABC issued a vague statement saying the network respects all guests and their lived experiences, but did not comment on whether George had crossed any internal editorial lines. Meghan's team went silent. The silence spoke volumes. By. The next morning, GMA attempted to pivot, with Robin Roberts awkwardly summarizing the event as a passionate disagreement. George did not address the moment on air, instead appearing business as usual in the following segments. Meghan's team released a brief statement 2 days later. The Duchess remains committed to using her voice for good and refuses to engage in spaces that seek to invalidate her experience. Behind the scenes, ABC executives were divided. Some saw the segment as a journalistic win, real, unfiltered. Others feared it would trigger long-term fallout with celebrity guests and public trust. The interview was clipped and uploaded to ABC's YouTube channel, but was quickly flooded with comments and dislikes, forcing the network to disable engagement temporarily. Talk shows, reaction channels, and even psychology experts weighed in. Some dissected George's tone, questioning whether his line of questioning was neutral or laced with subconscious bias. Others analyzed Meghan's nonverbal cues, interpreting her facial microexpressions as signs of suppressed rage or media trauma. Polls revealed that public opinion remained sharply divided by generational lines. Older viewers leaned toward George, praising his tough questions, while younger audiences identified with Meghan's refusal to be interrogated for clicks. The clip became one of the most replayed media moments of the year, earning comparisons to Tom Cruise's infamous Today Show blow-up, or Oprah's iconic "Were you silent or silenced?" line. It wasn't just a clash, it had become a cultural symbol. Weeks later, Meghan appeared on a smaller podcast hosted by a black female journalist and addressed the clash indirectly. Sometimes, she said softly, you walk into rooms hoping for dialogue and walk out realizing it was only ever a debate. The comment went viral instantly. Meanwhile, George was asked at a charity gala about the incident. His reply, I respect every guest. I don't regret asking difficult questions. The media dubbed the whole event the morning meltdown, though insiders said both ABC and Meghan's team quietly agreed never to work together again. As the dust settled, Meghan's podcast jumped to #1 on Spotify, fueled by curiosity and solidarity. Her brand, whatever one thought of it, had proven resilient once more. asterisk in the end. The GMA clash became less about a singular moment and more about what it revealed. About media expectations, about gendered scrutiny, about the fragility of televised civility. For Meghan, it was another storm in a life already filled with M1. She weathered with grace in the eyes of some and defiance in the eyes of others. For George, it was a reminder that even decades in the chair can't prevent blowback when emotion collides with control. And for the audience, it was an unforgettable spectacle, a woman walking off. Live mid-interview, choosing dignity over damage control. The headline lasted only a day, but the message echoed longer. Sometimes the most powerful answer is to stand up and leave.